Good afternoon, Jay.
Sure.
Welcome to this podcast. We can begin with your introduction.
Hey, Devi. Yeah, so I'll just give you a brief overview, right? And I think for your audience also that would help, right? I'm a senior product manager. I think the aim of this podcast is to kind of walk you through the journey of how I kind of got
Yes.
here in order to help other aspiring PMs kind of get there, right?
Yes.
So basics pedigree, right? So I've done my BTech and MTech from IIT Madras and have MBA from ISB. Apart from that, I had my own manufacturing startup, which I ran for about 6 years, right? So this was a LED light manufacturing startup where I kind of did everything, right? Which you kind of tend to do as a founder, right? So right from designing the product line to kind of working with local manufacturers and get the whole thing manufactured, assembled, doing the marketing, doing the sales, talking to clients, understanding their requirements, the entire gamut, right? Uh, I even tried pivoting the business into more of a service-based model. Once I kind of knew that manufacturing was kind of not getting me to where I wanted to be. But unfortunately, things didn't work out. So I kind of moved on, did my MBA from ISB, and then worked in a couple of product management stints, right? So was with a fintech firm for a year and then been with Flipkart for like 4.5 years or so, right? So that's the basics. We can dive into whatever.
All right. Jay, you have been in this space, product management space for quite a while. So, can you tell us about what is product management according to you and your outlook on this industry? Some key matrices specific to your domain.
Essentially, I'm the supply chain domain. Product management, like when people, or especially when freshers look at product management, right? They think of it as a very monolithic kind of skill set, right? But it's not really the same, right? So if you're a supply chain PM versus whether you're let's say cloud PM, or if you are a customer focused PM, a growth PM, right? All of these PMs kind of require different skill sets, right?
Yes.
Now, from a supply chain perspective, the metrics which I kind of focused on during my stints has been mainly the cost metric, right? There is, of course, customer satisfaction and metric as well. But from a supply chain perspective, there is limited we can do to kind of influence that. And there are also trade-offs in place, right? For example, if you want to make customers happy, you need to give them faster deliveries. Faster deliveries come at a cost. So if you want to deliver things faster, then your kind of cost goes up, right? So you have to have some guardrails in place and then keep the customer happy within those guardrails. Okay. So yeah, those are the kind of metrics I've been looking at.
Got it. So, Jay, you told us about your journey into product management space. So, tell us a little about how your MBA helps you day to day, and what else have you done that helps to add value in whatever you are doing?
See, an MBA at the end of the day is just a degree, right? A stamp. It gives a lot of credibility, right? That, hey, you are an MBA from a premier institute, so you would know what is there. But honestly, the things that you learn in MBA, right, are a little textbook. So you need to complement that with a real world understanding. Now, even before I got into the product management space, right? So my core product management experience is only post my MBA. But even during my MBA, I could see a stark difference in the people with a couple of years experience who were in that MBA versus like just freshers. So ISB doesn't really take freshers, but they have like 1-2 years experience, right? But people with 1-2 years experience versus like by LPs, exactly. So people with 1-2 years experience versus people with like 5-6 years experience, right? The amount they are able to actually grasp at what the course material is, right? And able to relate that with real world examples rather than it just being textbook, right? That is what matters. Now, honestly, from a product management skill set, the higher up you go, right, it becomes more of your soft skills that matter more than the hard skills, right? For example, like an entry level PM, you're more focused on let's say, can I write a product requirement document, right? Can I write a roadmap and those things, right? But those skills are relatively easy to kind of grasp, right? They're hard skills. And I think anyone who kind of puts a real effort in, within 6 months to a year, they can actually pick up those skills, right? Especially if they're on the job, then it's really easy to grasp those skills, right? But what really matters is those soft skills, right? Understanding how to influence people, understanding how to build consensus, right? Those are the things which take you far. And honestly, there's no book which can teach you that, right? The only way you can learn that is through real world experiences, right? Real world experiences in working, let's say, in your college, working with your colleagues, right? When you have disagreements, mediating those disagreements, right? And you do that at every step of the way. It's not that you only do it when you're a product manager, right? Even in your day-to-day life, even within your family, you will have those kind of situations, right? So it's a matter of learning those skills and applying them to your job to kind of get ahead.
Got it. Interesting, Jay. So, touching more upon this, what can you tell about what traits or what mindsets actually help become a more successful PM for someone? Like, a little more.
Okay, so everybody is gonna give you a different answer, honestly, to this question, right?
Absolutely.
However, from my perspective, I think empathy is the most important aspect, right? And empathy in the sense that understanding if somebody is opposing you, right? They are not doing it just to oppose you. Like there might be instances like that, right? Where people might just take an ego and stand and say that, hey, this won't work, kind of thing, right? But in most cases, they've had some experiences in the past, right? Because of which they are apprehensive about, let's say, a path which you've put forth, right?
Right.
So ultimately, it's understanding where they are coming from and then kind of navigating, helping them navigate from where they are to where you want them to be. And in a lot of instances, no matter how much data you have, no matter how much intuition you have backing you, you might be wrong. And it is important to kind of understand that, right? That, hey, even if you think it is right, there might be somebody with unique experiences who might be able to add value and say why you're wrong. And then maybe you kind of pivot yourself to kind of do that, right? So understanding your stakeholders, understanding your customers, that's the key thing.
Jay, one more question to this, which I have, is how do you, at a senior level, let's say, build consensus or gain respect? I mean, that is what I feel very important when you go to senior leadership, gain respect or gain consensus. So, how does one do that?
So again, see, data is very powerful in general, right? So if you're, see, otherwise without data, it's just everybody's opinion and gut feeling, right? So data is a key thing to kind of get you there. However, as I said, right, data is not the be all and end all, right? Because there is this phrase, right? There are lies, damn lies, and statistics, right?
Yes.
So there's always ways to interpret that data, and you have to be conscious of the fact that you're not just looking at data the wrong way to kind of build consensus, right? Because otherwise, what will happen is you'll end up looking at the data and you'll end up forming a hypothesis. You will have the data which tends to support your hypothesis also, but you might be looking at the data incorrectly, right? So one is that have that data when you talk to people to back your these things up, understand where they are coming from, what their needs are, what their requirements are, right? Because in life or in companies, right, as usual, there is always going to be trade-offs which you have to do. For example, what we just talked about, right? That, hey, customer wants 15-minute delivery kind of thing, right? That's the new thing. So customer wants 10 minutes delivery. Now that definitely comes at a cost, right? The reason why companies like Flipkart and Amazon are not doing it today, right? I mean, they will start doing it soon. But the reason why they're not doing it today immediately is because they are built differently, right? They have massive warehouses, massive centralized warehouses from where they deliver goods to you. So the goods take 1, 2, 3 days to come to you, depending on where you are, right? Whereas with Zepto, Blinkit, Swiggy, all of these places are actually
Shadow
like a
warehouses.
15-minute,
Yeah.
shadow warehouses, right? They're actually 15 minutes away from you. So the companies are structured differently, right? But obviously, because of that, there's a cost. So typically, what you'll see is if you order something on Blinkit, let's say, versus you order something on Amazon, Amazon will give it to you cheaper as compared to Blinkit, right? And the reason is because keeping inventory all over the place comes at a cost, right? So, for example, you can keep 100 units in one warehouse, or you can keep uh, 10 units in 50 different warehouses, right? Now, the problem is in one case, you're holding 100 units, whereas another unit case, you're holding 500 units. So that it comes at a cost, right? But then Blinkit, Swiggy, Zepto, they are kind of targeting a different customer segment, right? Or their value proposition is different. Their value proposition isn't cost. The value proposition is speed. That you order something and it will deliver to you in 10 minutes. So it kind of comes down to that. And that's a trade-off, right? Similarly, in all domains, you're going to have trade-offs, right? For an example, you might want to build something fast, but engineering might say that, hey, I can't build this fast because doing this fast is throwaway work, right? If I do it right, instead of 1 week, it will take 3 weeks, but then this will be more scalable, right? So tomorrow, when you want me to do something, it's not going to take 1 week, it will take 2 days, right? And then it's kind of balancing that out, right? So in some cases, you'll say, hey, I want this to be done quickly, even if it was throwaway work. In some cases, you might want to agree with your stakeholders and take longer to build it so that it's more scalable, right? So all of these are trade-offs. You need to have a central vision around which you rally the folks, essentially. If you have that central vision, right, then building consensus becomes much more easier, right? So you have some central vision, some sort of central goal in mind, rather than saying, I want to do this and look at this particular thing and do this only, right? Then that becomes a very myopic approach. So at a senior level, what tends to happen is you kind of start with the vision rather than starting with the feature which you want to build, right? And then you kind of drill down to how that feature kind of ties in with the vision. And if you are able to tell that story correctly, right, then that's what builds consensus.
Got it. Got it. So, Jay, coming to something specific to supply chain domain. So, on a broader level, can you tell us what goes behind the scenes? For example, when I place an order on Flipkart or Amazon, to finally when it is delivered.
Sure. So I will abstract it out as much as I can, right? So essentially, when you place an order, right, with Flipkart or Amazon, the first thing which they'll kind of do is figure out where to ship the item to you from, right? For example, as I said, right, they will have items stored in 10 locations, right? They need to figure out which is the closest to you. And sometimes closest might not even be the right metric, right? For example, let's say you're sitting in Pune, right? And we have items stocked in a Mumbai warehouse, and we have items stocked in a Nashik warehouse, just for sake of argument, right? Now, we might want the item coming from Mumbai warehouse might be cheaper to reach Pune, but the item coming from Nashik might reach faster.
Okay.
Right. So those are the kind of trade-offs which are continuously being done, right? And if you look at Flipkart, right, we deliver like 50 lakh orders a day kind of thing. And these are not individual humans making decisions ki, hey, now this customer has placed an order, where should I ship it from, right? These are all system-driven things. So once you kind of figure out where to pick it from, right, then essentially you will have these massive warehouses where we'll do batching, right? So again, one big difference between the way Flipkart works versus the way Zepto works, right, is the way Zepto would work is you place an order, somebody just goes, picks up your items and delivers them to you, right? Flipkart will actually wait till a certain number of items for a certain locality have been picked up, right, or have been ordered, right? So they'll do batching. Then they'll assign someone to go and pick up those items, pack those items, right, and dispatch those items. Once they dispatch them out of the warehouse, now again, right? So Flipkart delivers pan India, right? Out of the 20,000 pin codes or so in India, Flipkart delivers to 16,000 odd pin codes, which covers like 99% of the population, right? So the 4,000 pin codes are actually pretty remote areas where the coverage is not there. Now, given that, how do you do it, right? And again, another thing you have to understand is Flipkart isn't so Flipkart has two models of working, right? And so does Amazon. You have a marketplace model where you pick items from the sellers and deliver it to the customer. Another is where you have them stored in the warehouse and then you deliver it to the customer, right? Now, if you have a seller-based model, then essentially your seller could be sitting in Kashmir and your order could be placed from Kanyakumari, right? So how do you kind of route that shipment, right? And again, it like as in case of Zepto, he just picks it up from his warehouse, comes to your door and delivers it, right? In case of this, the order will essentially flow through from Kashmir to Delhi to Indore to Bangalore to Chennai, right? And then Kanyakumari kind of thing. And then you might have another route where it says this order reaches from Kashmir to Delhi, from Delhi it flies to Chennai, and then from Chennai again it goes by road, right? So that's essentially the network, and every company will design their network uh, to optimize for different things, right? You might optimize for speed, you might optimize for cost, you might optimize for customer experience, and there are levers to do that essentially. So that, and eventually the order reaches your local delivery hub, from where essentially there are like two shifts which are worked in morning, evening. So there'll be one batch of riders which go out in the morning, one batch who go out in the evening, and then go and deliver again. So maybe 20 to 30 orders at a time they'll pick up from the delivery hub and then go to the customer and deliver it.
I understand that a lot of automation here must be at place. So can you tell us more about automation in real world industry context, and how is it different from what students imagine it to be?
Sure. Okay. I'll kind of give you my own example, right? I don't know what the age group is for the students who are watching this, but when I started out in college, right, when I was 18, I thought that was abhi to matlab Terminator was my favorite movie back then, right? It still is, and I wanted to make that robotic arm, right? And I think it took me about a few weeks into college to build a real robot to figure out, ki boss, that's a very far way away, right? So industry automation is relatively rudimentary, I would say. You have your standard AGVs, right, or AMRs, which are essentially robots which can follow a path, or robots which have few sensors mounted on them which can traverse. And then you have more of your guided systems, such as your automated storage and retrieval systems, right? Most industries, and these are the two big things which most industries tend to use. Now, while they look simple, right? The challenge is kind of finding the right use case to augment your need, right? For example, again, coming back to this thing, right? So labor in India is cheap, right? So very expensive automation systems don't make sense, because in place of, let's say, a 30 lakh automation system, I can hire somebody for 20,000 and he can do the same job as the automation, right? So ROI is important, right? And you can do a lot with these rudimentary automations, right? For example, so I've been leading automation in Flipkart for 2.5 years, right? And we've experimented a lot with different technologies, right? So we've experimented with vision, we've experimented with AR, VR, we've experimented with drones, right? I mean, while all of these technologies can solve the problem, right? The large scale application of these technologies has been limited, at least in the Indian context, simply because of the cost factor, right? We have a lot of automation in Flipkart warehouses, but they are very, I would say, simplistic kind of automations, right? For example, we have something called a cross-belt sorter, right? Where essentially, so if you think about it, you have to, so if you go back to the network example, right? Now, every node has to effectively sort to 16,000 unique pin codes kind of thing, right? And you can't really have one person going and putting it in 16,000 pins, right? So how do you kind of effectively sort to that? So there will be some algorithm we use to figure out what is the grouping we do, right? Now, earlier on, what we did was we had these massive sorters which could actually sort to like 500, 600 locations simultaneously, right? And they were expensive. And the ROI on them was very high, right? It was like a 10, 12-year ROI. But eventually we figured out that in the Indian context, what works better is having a much simpler sorter, which can sort to only about 20 to 30 destinations kind of thing. And then post that, we do a manual sorting to the remaining destinations, right? So it's like so there are 20 destinations in the primary sort, and then each of those 20 destinations sort to about 30 destinations in the secondary sort. So you have that way 600 rather than having a single system which sorts to 600 unique destinations, right?
Right.
So those are the optimizations you kind of figure out. And automation is all about kind of figuring out what is the most optimum way to solve your problem at the cheapest cost. Because ultimately that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
If automation is increasing your cost, there's no point of automation.
Jay, tell me, when you are saying that you are experimenting with different delivery techniques or state of the art technologies, so is it like benchmarking, or how do you, like, for example, India, we compare it with countries like, let's say, Brazil, or I don't know. So is it some kind of benchmarking? How do we arrive that this solution can be brought to this country or something like that at a broader level?
So honestly, I think so. uh, I'll take a step back, right? And I'll explain what the difference between e-commerce versus your traditional industries is, and why e-commerce is more challenging, right? So if you look at your FMCG goods, right? So your PNGs and your Unilevers of the world, right?
Yeah.
They are selling soaps and shampoos, right? Which are at every kirana in the country, right? So every small shop you go to, they will have those things, right? And they work very, very efficiently, right? Now, the reason they work very efficiently is because if you look at it for hundreds of years, this has been happening. Global trade is not something which is recent, right? It has been happening for hundreds, if not thousands of years, right? And they have built on top of that. The challenge with e-commerce, right, is the varied number of units that you are able to order offsite, right? For example, if you look at PNG, right, they may make what 10 kinds of shampoos and 20 kind of soaps, and that's about it, right? I mean, I'm just taking that as an example, right? So you have 30 different SKUs. Whereas if you look at Flipkart today, you will have lakhs of different kinds of SKUs, right? The challenge is how to efficiently deliver that at the cheapest cost, right? And this is something which every company is figuring out. So while Amazon has been in the business for about 30 years now, right, they are still kind of figuring out more efficient ways to do it. Flipkart, of course, is not as old as Amazon, but it's
Mm.
still doing it, right? And then you have supply chain companies all over the world, right? You have your Coupang in South Korea, you have your Zalando in Berlin, you have whatever, right? There are like a ton of companies all over the world who kind of are in this domain, right? And each of them is kind of building out different parts of the solution. Some of them similar to the others, right? But some of them also very, very different, simply because of the geographic factors, right? For example, if you look at Europe, right, the way they would solve supply chain problem would be very different because their labor costs are very, very high, right? So they would solve a problem differently. As you rightly mentioned, a country like Brazil would be closer to India, right, in terms of the way it would work. But then again, I don't know how Brazil works, so that's a caveat there, right? But every geography is gonna have its own unique challenges,
Yes, yes.
right? And to solve it. And so what we would do is we would look at the best practices from all over the world and then kind of try to figure out what is it that we can use or what is it that we can innovate that no other place is doing, right? For example, there's some fantastic work we've done with drones, which is not something which is happening in other countries, right? So India, in terms of experimentation with drones, is far ahead in the rest of the world, right? I mean, it's the drone acts by itself is a relatively simple technology, right? That technology I think matured, I would say about 8, 10 years back, kind of thing, in terms of the kind of drones which could be built, right? Now the idea is to kind of find the right use case where we can actually utilize drones to, let's say, reduce cost or increase speed or increase customer delight. So those are the things that we kind of really look to innovate in.
Tell me a little about coming to your day-to-day responsibilities. How have they shifted from you being a product manager to now a senior product manager? How have they transformed?
So typically what happens is as you go higher and higher in the chain, right? I'll start the other way around. I'll start top down, and that may kind of help you understand the nuance, right? So if you look at somebody like the CEO of the company, right? He's looking at probably three metrics, right? He's looking at the cost, he's looking at the speed, and he's looking at the customer delight kind of thing, right? Customer NPS kind of factor. And he's looking at those metrics in a congregate manner, right? Whereas there will be, let's say, each senior VP is reporting to him, who will kind of own each of those metrics and who will drive them. Now, let's say a senior VP in Flipkart is looking at cost as a metric, right? Now, cost will have multiple other subheadings to it, right? So cost should be, let's say, cost of warehousing, cost of last mile delivery, cost of middle mile delivery, inventory cost, inventory storage cost, all of those things, right? So that is the way you kind of keep on breaking down metrics. So the lower you are in the hierarchy, the more granular metric you're looking at, right? So for example, if you're a PM1 in supply chain, your metric might be as simple as cost of picking from a warehouse, right? Which is essentially when you place an order, what is the cost of picking that item up from the galley and taking it to the packing station? As you go higher, you might look at not just the picking cost, but the entire process of outbound, right? Which includes stuff from picking to packing to dispatch, right? You go one level higher, then you're looking at entire warehousing cost, right? Which includes inbound, outbound, inventory storage, so on.
Got it.
So essentially, as you kind of climb up, your granular, your breadth keeps on increasing.
Right.
So that's essentially what you kind of end up doing.
Got it. Got it. So, Jay, can you tell me something about nascent stage startups? We see a lot of them these days. And if someone wants to just start out into product management, how would you advise that? And advice for anyone who is looking into this space, wants to get into this?
I think one misnomer which a lot of people have about product management is you need to have an MBA to get in, right? You don't really. It helps definitely having an MBA. It's not that having an MBA is going to hurt you, but typically what most people I've seen doing without an MBA is typically they are in engineering and then they kind of move within the company from the engineering role to a product management role. I've seen some others who kind of have no engineering background. They join some startup in a product management role. And so startups typically can't pay that well. So most people, I think, want to get into product management because the pay is really well. Startups can't really pay well. But then that's a good way for you to get product management experience. Because the one thing with product management is it's difficult for somebody to understand the day-to-day of product management unless they've actually done that.
Right.
Right. So no matter how many books you read, no matter how many people you talk to, right, it's going to be limited, right? So you have to be able to crack and get into it, right? Campus placements is one great way to do it, right? If the companies are coming to college who are picking you up for like product management roles, great. Product internships are a great way to go about it, right? If nothing else, go to a startup and say, hey, I want to be in product management. Can you give me something to do in product management? They might not pay you much, but then you'll at least learn the ropes of product management, right? So there are various avenues to kind of get in, right? And you have to be smart enough to figure out how you go about doing that.
Right. Got it. Got it. So, Jay, that kind of for me sums up the whole questionnaire, and it was great interacting with you. And thank you for your time. Thanks a lot.
So, no worries at all, baby.